Welcome to another episode called The Bullpen. I'm Clint Overton.
And I'm Ted Stan.
We're here from the world headquarters of Boardroom Bullpen and Mercury Collective. New podcast recording studio called The Collective. And kind of back at it, we're trying to get into a more rigorous routine and had an opportunity a couple weeks back to record an episode called Crawl, Walk, Run. And so, I think as we digested that and reflected on that a little bit, one of the things we recognized is that was, pretty high level conversation about what you need to think about as you're moving from startup to a scaling organization. And we're going to go down kind of like one level deeper today and really talk about some of the principal foundational things that we think are really critical to growing an organization. So really talking about the kind of the compounding effect of having great process and then layering great technology on top of it to help your business grow and really achieve two things we've been talking about a little bit this morning, which is efficiency and effectiveness.
And I think, to set the stage, what we're really looking at here is, you start your business, there's a few of you in it, you continue to grow, there's more complexity. So what worked early on, whether it's process or system, that has to change. It has to change just like the people running the business have to change. And so, the way that I look at it is growing organizations, not everybody stays on the boat the entire time because, again, things have to change. And I think that's the same when it comes to process. And I think it's the same when it comes to systems. I think you need to take a holistic approach when you're looking at it, but we'll dive a little deeper. But that's how I'd intro what we're doing here today.
Yeah, one of the interesting things that we talked about a little bit this morning, too, was just this idea that as companies go through different intervals of growth, there's a lot of studies that say that the leadership team that's required to get the business to different levels of growth is actually different people in many cases. Now, that's not always the case, and I'm sure a listener or two out there is probably going to come up with a few examples of where that isn't the case, but there's a high propensity for that, and a lot of that is just really the kind of capability and capacity of those leaders to help grow the organization, especially if they haven't had experience scaling a business. But I think part of what we want to talk about today, which really goes back to this mantra of crawl, walk, run, is that as you're growing your business, there just really aren't any shortcuts. And I say this all the time, and we live in a society that is very focused on the easy button solution. Talk about fast food society, like everybody's looking for an edge. And it's okay to look for edges, but if you really want to optimize your business, there's like real work that goes into it. And it's like the basic principles of that are required to get there. So we're going to talk a little bit today more about what level of energy you have to put into process and then where you need to be at in your process before you invest in technology. And then when you invest in technology, like what are the really key things you need to do to actually harness the capability of it?
And I think the other thing we need to look at is how are people identifying that, okay, we're at the point where there's failure or it's a struggle. I mean, why are we struggling? Is it really that we've got a system? Is the system the problem? Is it the process the problem? Is it the leader that's the problem? I mean, I think there are many areas that you can look at, but, we've talked many times about bottlenecking. It's not always the CEO. It's not always the CFO, the COO that's that bottleneck. Could be somebody out on the line that, has an idea and they've been doing it this way for 15 years and they've made modifications to it and they're doing it better than anyone else can. And they're unwilling to share that secret sauce. And how do you get that secret sauce out of somebody? How do you recognize that, hey, I'm trying to close the books. It's taking me 15 days, which that should never happen. I mean, that's the reality of it. But, is it the leader in the process? Is it the system that's in place? Is it a system that's outdated given the size of the company you are? So I think there are a lot of factors that you can look at and recognize,
That's right.
We're having these problems, but I mean, it needs to be identified. Where is that problem at? Is that a system problem? Is it a process problem? Is it a person problem? Regardless, you need to recognize that, hey, we've got these struggles. How can we forecast out into the future and make the determination that at this point, we're going to we're going to change the system, we're going to change the process, and hopefully not have to change the people, but that does happen.
Yeah, and I think part of what we've kind of chatted about a little bit is like, again, like the crawl, walk, run mantra is the kind of fundamental steps that you have to take in the order, right? So, going back to the trying to take shortcuts is you really should never invest in technology until you have a well-defined process. And a well-defined process is documented, measurable, global. What a good process isn't is 5 different people with 5 different versions, undocumented. Or example I think you were trying to provide earlier is, the one subject matter expert who sits in the corner that everybody has to depend on 100% because Susie or Johnny are the only people that know how to do that process. And then when you recognize as you're trying to grow that I need 2 or 3 more Bobbies and Susies, there's like this reluctance oftentimes by that person who's like shielding everyone from their expertise because they feel like all their self-worth to the organization comes with their subject matter expertise. And if they tell anybody how to do that work, then suddenly they're expendable, right? And so these things happen in all sizes of organizations, but I think part of what we really want to make sure we get across to the listeners today is that it's really important to understand that, as you're growing, even in the early stages, if you have processes that have significant influence on the outcome and success of the company, that either have risk exposure or high velocity, high volume processes, those processes have to be documented. And they have to be measured. And if you're not doing either one of those things, then you're already lacking continuity and technology won't help.
That absolutely. And, when you look at it from a process standpoint, if you do have 4 or 5 stakeholders, 10 or 20 stakeholders, everybody really needs to be bought in on that process as well. Because the goal of putting a new system in place is the old one wasn't efficient given the new complexities that you brought when you started scaling your business. And so everybody has to agree on that, have to say this is the path forward for us. And then they need to buy into the technology everybody on the team has to buy into the technology in that process, because if not, if you have a broken process and you're buying a new system, it's not going to work. You can buy software, but it isn't going to fix your problem. It's the people in the process that are going to fix your problem.
Yeah, and kind of backing up a little bit, just in terms of like as you're maturing your business, we talk a lot about KPIs and measurements of success or metrics that matter. Like there's all kinds of different terms you can use for them. But like 3 fundamental systems that we would say generally apply to most businesses, and 2 of the 3 to all, right? What's your finance and accounting platform or system? What's your resource planning or ERP? And the 3rd is your CRM system, whatever that might be. And, difference probably depending on the size of the business, the type of business that you're in, complexity of your business that drives some of those things. But I think one of the really key things is, and we see this all the time, is if not everyone's bought into the process and the measurement, then there's a lot of hard conversations on a monthly basis as the executive team sitting around the table and saying, this is how we performed, and holding people accountable, right? So if you think about it, when you're running a business, you should have kind of, what we call like top of the house metrics that say like, this tells us that we're winning or losing in our business, right? And typically there's also kind of a next level of those, like for each function within your organization. And if you're getting into a conversation on a monthly basis with your team and there is a debate about numbers, and if there's a debate, that typically means that there's a lack of definition or data quality. Or 2, there's people who are building their own processes and systems, right? Using their own spreadsheets or their shared directory or sticky notes on their desk. And that's no way to run a scalable business, right? And so, I think one of the things that we really believe wholeheartedly in is get a well-defined process, get clarity in terms of the metrics of success of that process, make sure that those metrics align to what success looks like as an organization. And then I think once you have that, as you're growing, having like this constant evaluation of where do we want to be in these processes? Do we want to be 2 days faster? Do we want our quality to be at X or Y? And then consistently iterating those processes and then getting those processes to a place where if you want to invest in technology, you know exactly what the right technology is to go after in order to kind of take it to the next level.
Right. And I would say, just to take it a level deeper when you were talking about, because I think we've all experienced it where, hey, I'm the CFO and I say this is what sales look like for this quarter. And, I'm the VP of sales or the CRO, and this is what I say the numbers are. And I mean, that alignment and that agreement is just so incredibly important. But the other thing I would say with that is you can see how it gets out of alignment too, because we bought the CRM, we bought the new ERP, we've got, the latest and greatest new tools out there. But the reality is, putting a process in place, coming to that agreement early on is going to stop a lot of those debates that we've all had to go through as an executive.
No doubt about it. And I think the, kind of getting into that next level, right, is the getting into a consistent rhythm around process documentation and measurement and constant reevaluation in terms of how you're doing, right? I think one of the things that we talked about this morning too is, you should have a good annual forecast for your business and a budget and a plan. Hopefully you have maybe a multi-year outlook. Everything that you're doing month to month, quarter to quarter should be with a plan to achieve that overall objective of the business. Typically that includes some level of scaling in certain processes in the organization. So like all those things are like hyper critical as like foundation one, kind of ground zero, table stakes, if you will. And then, we talk about going out and getting the latest and greatest technology is like actually spending the time and energy, right? Not just because like, hey, I'm in this peer group and somebody says this is super cool, or I got a demo and I was blown away by it. Like do your homework, right? Understand like what is other folks in your industry doing? Like what's the good, the bad, and the ugly? What makes your business different than your competitor? Get the technology that's going to help you be most successful. So the selection process is super critical. But I cannot say this enough. The process in preparation for business requirements and inclusion by like really key stakeholders in the organization, having a great business requirements gathering, functional requirements, QA testing process, and then actually having like great training so that when you go live, so often, even if you have great technology, if nobody's trained, then all of a sudden everybody's blaming the technology when nobody actually invested the time to make sure that the users know how the heck to use this new slick technology you've invested all this money in.
Right. And again, just to take it back to process for one moment, again, the buy-in from everybody on that team should be part of we bought into this as a team. We're going to go ahead and move forward with the training as a team. We're all going to put our best effort forward on this so that what we actually bought and the value we were sold, we can get out of it. Because a lot of times, I mean, you're well aware of this, our listeners are well aware of this. People will buy technology. Again, it's not going to solve a problem if you don't put the effort and the time and to understand what you're actually using it for. It's not going to be successful. It's not a problem solver. It is a tool that helps you as a worker, executive, management team member.
Well, and we talk about this a lot, right? So if you think about the importance of outputs to success, like in terms of high quality product, producing a lot of product, delivering on the promise for your customer, I think the folks that sometimes often forget that the process quality and the data quality are so critical to that, because if you don't have those things buttoned up, when you layer on technology, it's an accelerant. So it can be standard technology out of the box. It could be investment in automation. Obviously now AI that everybody thinks, like I can shortcut all the work that I haven't done and AI is going to fix it all for me. But the reality is all you're doing, if you think about like a conveyor belt, and I have like this production of a product or a service, and there's all these defects associated with it that I actually have like all this cleanup that I do today. If you don't fix the process and the data inputs, all you're doing is speeding up really bad output. And you're actually putting your business at more exposure, not actually enhancing and helping the business grow.
And I mean, it's a both and, right? So, I mean, it is clean data and it's having the right process in place. And I mean, obviously, both are governed by employees of the company, but when it comes to process improvement, I mean, right butts in the right seats, incredibly important.
For sure.
And then from a data standpoint, I mean, I think it's been expressed many times out there, and you hear it a lot from the AI experts out there, but clean data, but the process is just as important in my book.
No doubt about it. So, I think as we kind of simplify the message from today's meeting, really starting with the basics is the point you've made a couple of times. So let's make sure we have the right people in the right seats. Let's make sure that there's not a single point of failure, right? So we can't just have Bobby or Susie, who's the only person that knows how to do something and it's in their head. Get processes well defined and documented, because if you don't, you might have 5 people in your team and an important processor who are already doing it 5 different ways. And then when you onboard 5 new people, you're going to have 5 more iterations of it. Make sure that you got really clean data. Make sure that you have clarity and agreement on what metrics of success look like in your business. Once you do that, put in the homework on what's the right technology stack that makes sense for you to accelerate your business, and then invest more in terms of making sure that you've got a really well-defined should-be process, defined with the technology stack, creating the enhancement, that you have controls around that you've got great business requirements, that you have a governance process around that, and then you actually have great training up for your team, and then candidly ongoing closed-loop feedback around what they're experiencing. So you're always improving upon that, which all those things help you scale faster and allow one person to do the work of 3, right, or more, which is really what you're trying to do when you bring these things together and, create like a, hyper value for the organization.
Yeah. I guess the way that I would wrap it up is, I would look at it as an exercise in, we already look at financial forecasting for the company. Our leaders know, what tools we have, what shortfalls that we have at this point in time. So you're already having that look to the future. Let's marry that business plan with the financial plan. Let's make sure that what we are planning to spend our hard-earned dollars on as a company is going to be effective and efficient for the company. And so that's how I look at it as a wrap up to what we've been talking about here today.
Well, in the meantime, if you want to learn more about our companies, you can check Boardroom Bullpen out at boardroombullpen.com. Our Salesforce, certified Salesforce implementation business, the Mercury Collective at themercurycollective.com. If you want to hear more about Call to the Bullpen podcast, check out your favorite podcast solution set or check us out at calltothebullpen.com. Until next time, I'm Clint Overton.
And I'm Ted Stan.
See you soon.